Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Dailies, your morning program where we keep you updated with the happenings from the Nigerian newspaper. I am Said Elisha, today being the 17th of January 2025. Quite a number of interesting events and stories on our paper, so please do well to stay tuned by dropping your comments, your views, and your own point of opinion regarding all of this. I will be doing this program alongside Rachel.
Good morning, Sarah.
All right, we have quite a number of the papers, and we would love to start with New Nigerian Newspaper.
The first story on the paper, Olu of Warri warns land speculators to stay off Royal Cemetery vicinity. Kaduna NNP gets new executive, new state chairman talks tough ahead 2027. The big story on the paper is price hike. Marketers jostle for Dangote refinery bulk purchase incentives. You can start with the details on the front page. Governor Fintiri vows to rig all to end operation in Adamawa. The writer says, I must protect your mandate. LGA chair traditional ruler praise his confidence. Preserve intellectual freedom in student loan policy. CAPPA urges federal government and NEL fund managers. Court members donate caregiver lunch to FTH Lokoja. Katsina police parade suspected killer of 12-year-old gun runner. You can find details on page 10. We have a picture where we can see Ogun State Governor Senator Ademola Adeleke inspecting Guard of Honor at the 2025 Armed Forces Remembrance Day held in October. And that's all the news on New Nigerian.
On First News newspaper, 27 Days of Hell. Retired Archbishop recount horrific kidnapping ordeal. You can find detail in the paper. Crude oil prices will dictate petrol costs. This is coming from the federal government. Nigeria's FX reserves dropped by $435 million in 7 days. Pope Francis suffers another fall, injures his right arm. You can find more detail of that in the paper. Renewed strike shatters ceasefire hopes in Gaza. We will recall we saw where there was a ceasefire, and here we're seeing that there was a renewed strike. So do well to read more detail of this international story as well in the paper. The big story, Tinubu faces pushback. Governors back tax reform but slam VAT increases, talking about the value added tax. And we're seeing concerning the budget Buhaha, lawmakers, IGP clash in National Assembly drama. Wike revokes 568 FCT lands over unpaid CFO bills. Downside of the paper, foreign fighters fueling terror resurgence in Nigeria coming from the defense headquarters. And that's all on First News newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, governors endorse Tinubu's tax reforms give conditions, advocate equitable VAT sharing and tax stability. You can find details of the big story on page 4. Agric Ministry NIMC roll out new registry for farmers. NMDPRA unveils strategic roadmap to drive Nigeria's petroleum industry growth. Adeleke imposes fresh curfew in Ifon Ilobo. You can find details on page 2. Nigerians should anticipate 60% hike in tariffs, a statement from Bosun Tijani. You can find details on page 13. Speaker Abba Zodima orders affected as Wike revokes Abuja land titles. And that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
Looking up to Friday Leadership newspaper, I am humbled by leadership award coming from Governor Namadi. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. Trending AI to displace 92 million jobs by 2030. This is a report. You can do well to see if your job is also at risk. On numbers, airport runways to cost 580 billion naira coming from the FAAN. Detail found on page 2. The big story, finally, governors accept the tax reform bills with the riders seek new sharing formula for VAT, and then we see that ASU rejects the bill. So while others are accepting, others are rejecting. You can do well to find the detail and the reasons on page 4. CBN records 6 billion naira dollar external reserves growth, detail found on page 17. Federal government caps telecom tariff hike at 60%. We've seen that from our papers where we've seen that the federal government have given the go ahead to telecoms that the limit should be between 30 to 60%, which we actually look into that. That is still not fair. You can find more detail of that story on page 7. Alleged 12.3 billion naira fraud. EFCC arraigned Otideko on Nasaya on Monday. You can find more detail on page 4. We have the speeches to the Kwara State Governor, Chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Abdulrahman, and then we also have the Chairman APC Governors Forum and Imo State Governor Hope Ozodima, and then we have other governors. This happened during the subnational consultation with the Presidential Committee on Tax Reform with the NGF at Transcom Hilton, Abuja yesterday. More detail of the story can be found in the paper, and that's all on Friday Leadership newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, the federal government is saying Abuja Kaduna Kano road to be completed in 14 months. CBN unveils digital solutions to boost efficiency in service delivery. Sports 2026 World Cup qualifiers, Super Eagles get 10% of unpaid bonuses. The big story on the paper is on tax reform bills. Governors seek modern tax system, throw weight behind reform bills. The writer says propose 50% equity, 30% derivation, 20% population sharing for VAT. Tinubu's economic reform necessary to reset Nigeria, a statement from Akande. You can start with the details of the big story on the front page. Rotary International commits over $300 million to eradicate polio in Nigeria to get more allocations from $50 million fund. Federal government slams Sanusi over comments on economic reforms, urges Kano monarch to rise above partisan interest. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Vanguard, where we have crude oil price will dictate petrol pump costs coming from Lukupiri. You can find detail of that on page 19. Influx of e-swap, Southern governors mobilize, activate regional security. Southern governors mobilize and activate regional security. More detail found on page 7. The federal government to Emir Sanusi, we don't need your approval for Tinubu's laudable policies. Yesterday, we will recall a comment that has been attributed to the Emir saying that he is not going to actually support this present administration because they lack credible individuals. And here we're seeing the federal government replying back that they do not need his approval for the policies. So you can do well to read more detail of that on page 9. The big story which is making rounds on most of the paper this morning is regarding the tax bill, where we see governors offer new formula for sharing the VAT proceeds. Propose that the VAT distribution based on 50% equality, 30% derivation, and 20% population. Back to Tinubu on reforms, and then why the North is jittering over the tax reforms coming from a senator. You can do well to read more detail of that on page 5. Rowdy session in National Assembly as IGP presents 2025 budget. More detail on page 2. Regarding kidnapping, Nigerians may have paid 10 trillion naira ransom in 2024. Coming from Soludo, we will record that it has become a way of means for a number of these kidnappers. So they are actually cashing out, and here we're seeing that, according to him, about 10 trillion naira have been paid as ransom just last year. You can do well to read more detail of this on page 10. How hardship drives some Nigerians to look for food in garbage, with the writer saying it's national emergency with devastating consequences coming from experts. One of grave health risks for children, says scavengers at risk of leading poisoning, cancer, malnutrition, mental injuries, and others. Scavenging strip Nigeria of people, rather, scavenging strip people of human dignity, coming from a sociologist, and then call for a social safety net to reduce poverty. All of this regarding scarcity or as well as a result of hardship for people who cannot afford to feed. And then the picture story, we can see governors meet the presidential committee on tax reform, and that's all on Vanguard newspaper.
On this day newspaper, Otudeko refutes alleged role in FBN Holdings, vows to defend reputation, says no plan to return to board. Federal government convenes inaugural oil industry forum set to halt policy, regulatory conflict and others. Cardoso unveils initiatives to boost payment turnaround, streamline approval processes and others. The big story on the paper, tax reform. Governor's Presidential Committee endorsed revised VAT 50% equality. The writer says approves 30% derivation, 20% based on population, and I think this is going to be a challenge for the Southeast and the South governors. Senate projects 100 trillion naira budget for 2026 fiscal year, not jittery because it's ill prepared. Natasha explains. Northern groups decry politicization of issues. ASU insists move will destroy public varsities. The picture story here is the Senate interactive session on the 2025 appropriation bill, where we can see the Senate president alongside the deputy Senate president and also the minority leader. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, the big stories regarding war against terrorists. Caught in the middle, survivors count loss of accidental airstrikes, where we can see a picture story trying to actually show what's happening while we are having, our security agency or force doing all they can do to clear these terrorists. We're seeing that civilians actually paying dearly for it as well. So this is quite more like a fight against survival. More detail of that is on page 4 and 5. Federal government NEMC launched digital card to access farmers and others. And then we have Boko Haram ambush, UN demand justice for 40 killed in Borno. More detail found on page 30. On tax reform, governor's presidency shall VAT hike agree on new revenue sharing formula. Rowdy session at the National Assembly over budget defense. Defense headquarters blame external forces, local collaborators for the terrorism surge in the Northeast. EFCC to arraign ex-bank chiefs over alleged 12.3 billion naira fraud. PDP shun Ondo local government poll as police restrict movement, one miscreants. You can find that on page 28. Police seal PDP secretariat in Rivers over leadership crisis. The last story focused on economic reform, stable fiscal policies. LCCI charges the federal government. More detail of that business story can be found on page 16, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
A Nigerian Tribune, the first story, weekend withdrawals make channel plots out of all from rep speaker, governors, and others. Rowdy session disrupts IGP's 2025 budget defense at National Assembly. We have a backlash by Abraham Obodo. You can find at the back page, big INEC budget and unending cycle of electoral failures. Federal government dismisses Emir Sanusi's comments on Tinubu's economic reforms. 6 years after, Kingmakers pick new Eleruwa forward name to Makinde. Inform irregular communal crisis, Adeleke imposes curfew. The big story on Nigerian Tribune, governors propose new VAT sharing formula. Now, this is the proposal, 50% based on equality, 30% based on derivation, 20% based on population. Back tax reform bills oppose reduction in corporate income tax, says no to terminal clause for TET fund Naseni, NITDA is sharing of development levies. ICPC files charges against Jimmy Lawal, former El Rufai's aide, and 3 others. Ondo LG election, PDP candidates and loggerheads over withdrawal from Saturday poll. Details can be found on page 3. These are the major headlines on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Punch newspaper, governors propose a new VAT sharing formula, OK tax bill. Details found on page 2. Defense headquarters blames foreigners for renewed terror attacks. You can find that on page 14. 12.3 billion naira fraud EFCC to arraign Otudeku, ex First Bank MD on Monday. Data found on page 12. Pengasa project petrol price hike as the crude oil rises. More detail found on page 20. And on the big story, Dangote refinery projects 650,000 barrel per day by June, plans crude import. Facility now producing 500,000 per day as officials look beyond Nigeria to meet demand for products. More detail in the paper. Fubara Wike camps clash as police occupy Rivers PDP secretariat. Ogun guard arrested for allegedly defilement of a 6-year-old. This is a very sad story on the human angle. INEC deletes 7,746 dead persons from voters register. You can find more detail on page 7. I'm glad that they're doing that so we can have the actual number of registered voters. The picture story is showing state governors and stakeholders during a consultative section with the Presidential Committee on Tax Reform in Abuja. This happened yesterday, and we can see the photo credit is from Nasarawa State Government, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, EFCC to arraign Oba Otudeko, ex-First Bank MD Onasanya over alleged 31 billion naira fraud. You can start with the details on the front page. We have a sports story here on the English Premier League. Ahmad saves Man United with incredible late hat-trick to beat Southampton. You can find details on page 22. Experts expect current Naira stability to last. A report. Presidency challenges Peter Obi to tweet development. Tinubu congratulates World Trade Organization DG Okonjo-Iweala Adiola Adesina on honorary awards. Tax reform bills is the big story on the Matrix. Nigerian governors make U-turn. Throw way behind bills, kick against VAT increase and CIT reduction. 6 equitable sharing formula for VAT. Passage of tax reform bills to attract more investment, a statement from Governor Sule. Trump unveils official presidential portrait resembling viral mugshot. We don't need your approval for Tinubu's policies, federal government tells Emir Sanusi. Police seal PDP secretariat in Port Harcourt. You can find details on page 18. We have an entertainment story. Baba gave son Nino car on 19th birthday. You can find details on page 23. We have a picture with the caption Infrastructural Development. We can see Minister of Information and National Orientation Mohammed Idris conversing with Minister of Works Senator Dave Mahi and the leadership of the National Assembly Committee on Works on a visit to the project site of Section 1, Abuja Kaduna, of the Abuja Kaduna Zaria Kano Road project yesterday. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, NNPCL remit 10 trillion naira to Federation account in 2024, coming from Kiari. You can find more detail of the story in the paper. The big stories on food security in National Assembly advocates higher budgetary allocation for the agri sector. You can read detail of that story in the paper. Then we are looking at willful effectiveness of standing committees coming from the National Assembly. Energy experts criticize NERC electricity tariff approval proceed for discourse. Importers, clearing agents reject National Assembly 12 trillion naira custom revenue targets. Nigeria's Kayode Adewale is UNESCO Global 2025 finalist teacher prize winner. We've seen that he made it among the top 50 teachers, and we hope that we have more teachers, backing that award. Coming from Zamfara State, global rights demand justice for victims of military airstrike. More detail found in the paper, and that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On Daily Independent, the big story, governors back tax reform bills reject increase in VAT, endorse revised VAT sharing formula, says it ensures equitable distribution of resources. The top of the paper, 2025 budget, Senate will ensure every naira spent touches lives of Nigerians. A statement from Akpabio, the Senate president. Rivers PDP crisis, Award threatens to sanction Wike orders over anti-party activities. The writer says court sacked Chukwuemeka, claims he remains party chair. PDP NWC backs Award-led Rivers State ESCO. Still on Daily Independent, Nigeria's inflation will start moderating from January, a statement from an analyst. National Assembly considers exempting Nigeria police from envelope budgeting system. Pengassan links high fuel price to FX volatility, carpets federal government over frequent cases of grid collapse. Alleged 12.3 billion naira fraud, EFCC to arraign Otudeko, ex-First Bank MD Onasanya. You can find details of this story on page 7. Wike revokes Uzodinma, DV Abe, 565 orders plot of land in Abuja. The last story here, third mainland bridge safe, federal government assures Nigerians. And that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
Right before we continue further with the paper review, let's take a time and let you drop your own comment and your view regarding what you feel about governors finally embracing the tax reform, but then having a problem with the VAT, where we're seeing they give their own proposal of what they feel it should be. And so we would love to hear your own inputs. When we come back, we will continue the paper review. Please stay tuned with us. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper, ranging from talking about the governors finally embracing the tax reform, where we're seeing that as we're still not very comfortable with the tax reform, and then governors as well are not comfortable with the value-added tax reform. So we have quite a number of reaction coming, as well as we're also seeing concern regarding Nigerians going hungry because of the hardship, and then we saw that even our inflation has increased. So quite a number of things are actually contributing to the hardship in Nigeria. We would love to have your own views regarding that, so please do well to drop them, as they always go a long way to help profile or recommend some of the things that can be done. I'm Sally. I still have with me Rachel. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Voice of Liberty newspaper. NGF backs tax reform bill, proposes 50-30-20 VAT ratio. You can do well to read detail of that in the paper. 12.3 billion naira alleged fraud, EFCC to arraign Oba Otuteku, ex-First Bank MD, on Monday. On insecurity, federal government drafting into realm of misgovernance coming from the CNG. Saldana Memorial, we won't stand a wolf and see the North decay, coming from Al Mustafa. The former chief security officer of the late military head of state, General Sani Abacha, Major Hamza Al Mustafa, retired, has reaffirmed their commitment to getting the North back on track and to get it totally unified. So we look forward to seeing the synergy and collaboration concerning that. On the international scene, Pope Francis sustained forearm injury after fall. And then we have Dangote refinery production pushing EU refineries out of business coming from OPEC. On hardship, Tinubu has no manifesto, just a sense of entitlement coming from Apostle Suleiman, where he said that Nigerians are actually benefiting what they wanted. So it's more like him saying that it serves Nigerians right. So you can do well to read more detail of what Apostle Suleiman is saying regarding the hardship. And on Kaduna, where we have court denies El-Rufai aid Jimmy Lawan bail in money laundering case. More detail found in the paper. That's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On Daily Sun newspaper, Defense Headquarters explains rebound in terror attacks, cites influx of foreign fighters in the northeast and northwest. Military needs modern equipment to combat budgetary criminality, Minister is saying. The big story, Governors Forum endorses revised VAT sharing formula, where we can see a picture where we can see the Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, Adeboyega Oyetola, Chairman Senate Committee on Privatization, Orji Uzo Kalu, Deputy Minority Leader. We can see Lewe Oyenwumi and Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, at the National Assembly in Abuja yesterday. And that's the picture story on Daily Sun. More stories, 52.88 million repatriation assets. Tugar engages U.S. Secretary of State over bilateral. You can find details on page 27. We have federal government replies Sanusi tells Emir to keep support. And budget defense lawmakers fight over IGP. And that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, EFCC to arraign Otuteku on Nasaya over alleged 12.3 billion naira fraud. Failure to defend budget will attract zero allocation. National Assembly frowns at tachiness. You can read more detail of that on page 26. Of course, we have the big story here. Governors back tax reform bill seek adjustment to VAT, where we see the NGF. We stand for equitable distribution of resources. Gray area resolve, says today. Now we see the sharing model where we have for equality 20%, and then 50% for the NGF, and then derivation 60% for federal government, 30% for NGF, and then population 20%, both the federal government and the Nigerian Governors Forum. So you can read more detail of that in the paper. And then we have federal government economic reform on course despite Sanusi's doubt. Leadership should avoid partisan untidiness. You can find more detail of that in the paper. Foreign fighters behind terror attack in the northwest and the northeast, says defense headquarters. Downside, U.S. honors for 6 Nigerians. And then we have withdrawal from council poll on settle Ondo PDP local government elections. You can find this story in the paper, and that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On New Telegraph, the first story, World Bank retains Nigeria's 2025 growth forecast at 3.5%. Report projects Naira to sustain current stability. UAE President accepts Tinubu's invitation to visit Nigeria. Drama as National Assembly Budget Defense Session with Nigeria Police Force. Federal government to Sanusi, rise above partisanship, prioritize Nigeria's interests. U.S. confident Gaza ceasefire will hold as Israeli cabinet stalls. The big story is on tax reform bills. Governors in support of changes to archaic laws. A statement from Abdul Razak. Reject increase in VAT. Proposed bill would harm public varsities. Statement from Bauchi Asu. BPP saved Nigeria 1.9 trillion naira from contract fraud. Abbas Senator Kalu orders Monley Deputy Chief Whip Onanuga. Tension in Edo as APC forcefully ejects PDP from party secretariat. Alleged $9.6 billion PNID scam. Have no witness to call, Brighton tells court. Still on New Telegraph, terrorist attacks. Influx of fighters from Sahel liable for resurgence. This is a report from the defense headquarters. Says military killed 156 terrorists, nabbed 146 suspects in 1 week. Soldiers, civilians missing as terror gangs ambush troops in Borno. Military needs modern equipment to combat banditry and others. A statement from Matowali. In Rivers, PDP National Working Committee accepts judgment nullifying Wiki-backed congresses. The last story here is a study. Gut bacterium can help lower sugar cravings. You can find details on page 29 and know what bacterium precisely can help with that. And that's all the news on New Telegraph.
On this, Nigeria governors back tax reform bills reject VAT increase with detail of the story found on page 6. Influx of foreign fighters fueling terrorist attacks in the north coming from defense headquarters. Military killed 156 terrorists and nabbed 146 suspects in 1 week. Ohanizi leadership, where we have Igbako Ikwere strip Ezota Abata of traditional titles and honors. You can find detail on page 5. Senators reps in near fisticuff over IGP's budget presentation. Tempers flare when two lawmakers raised concern that the IGP's presentation did not align with the documents they received. So you can find detail of that on page 5. We have the speeches story where we can see the chairman board of trustee Rotary International Foundation Mark administers polio vaccine on a child at the primary health care center Jabi in Abuja yesterday. And that's all on this Nigerian newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, the big story is a Kenneth Moro interview, my 2025 objectives. With a statement, this 2025, I have sat back to appreciate what I have achieved and also see the possibility of achieving more things. This year, I want to improve in whatever I have been doing. You can find details on page 6. Eagles B. Ru Chan postponement. Dessers open up on possible Rangers exit. Australia target WAFCON glory. Why Joshua silent on Fury retirement. A statement from his manager Hen. Saudi chief tempts Salah with £65 million deal. Arsenal begins search for new striker. Only Messi better than Yamal. A statement from Gavi. Milan keen on Rashford and Walker. Madrid pondered a Krameni sale. You can find details on page 3. In cricket, Nigeria coach upbeat ahead women's under-19 World Cup. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
On the Business Day newspaper, phone call rates to cost 18 naira per minute under the new tariff. And I remember you saying that yesterday, Richard, that even the 30 to the 60% increment or percentage that we're looking at. So I can imagine for every call, 18 naira per minute. And I recall what you said. I remember, I think during our program, I think it was in Nigeria now, where you say if only we were in the system where we can say, okay, I'm only budgeting for data, so I can actually make my calls, I could send my SMS and everything, or just chat whatever I need to do. It would have been easier. But imagine you have to consider some of your loved ones that actually do not have a smartphone or an Android phone to actually get that. So I just cannot imagine what it would mean. 18 naira per minute. We're already complaining about how much we are already spending. And then for the SMS, I mean, we're looking at maybe 7 naira, just like we said, per SMS. So this is really, really going to be a tough one in Nigeria. We are not done eating, and then we are looking at how much we're going to be spending for communication. So it's making communication quite difficult and expensive for Nigeria. But I mean, this is what it is. These telecommunications really have to survive as well. But I hope the government can come with something better, because we look at the reason why they're doing into this. It's something the government can actually help out. Looking at power, looking at our naira, and there are some of the policies economically that's affecting their business. But this is what it is, as we can see on the paper. Still on Business Day newspaper, ginger price jumps sixfold on bleak disease, where the price of ginger have jumped 6 times in 2 years, rising from 50,000 per bag in 2023 to about 300,000 in 2025. Farmers attribute the price hike to low supply created by the devastating effect. And I remember we had that also for Irish potatoes at the time in Plateau State. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the Ministry of Agri doing something that they can do regarding all of this. For ginger, we know that particularly we can see it in places like Kaduna and the rest that actually plant this in bulk. So what is the government doing regarding this? We saw the reason why onions is expensive. So onion is expensive, ginger is expensive. I think lately I've seen tomatoes have actually dropped a little in the market. That you can actually even get a basket here in Jos for maybe 4,000, depending on how much. But we know that then you must be budgeting for 6,000 and above to have good tomatoes that you can actually spend. So I mean, things are becoming difficult. Well, you can read more detail on the front page and continue on page 30. Fidelity 20 billion private placement share outstrip combined offer. More detail in the paper. Governors face off with federal government on VAT increase. And the big story on the paper, Nigerians pay 11 times more for antibiotics. With the rider FX drives up the cost of medicine, government urged to implement executive order on imported drugs, and then expert pick holes in 2025 health budget. So we're seeing that even the health is not getting enough budget and all of that. So quite a number of things happening in Nigeria. Well, just keep our fingers crossed and hope that the government of the day have all of this under control, and then we hope to see things coming up for the better for everybody in the country. And that's all on Business Day newspaper. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Stella.
As well, thank you to our viewers and every other person who made this program a success. Till we come your way next week, please do have a lovely weekend.